Okay, welcome. Today is November 1st, 2017. This is a regular meeting of the Pitkin County Board of County Commissioners, and I will be chairing the meeting today because George is not present. So bear with me because I haven't done this in a long time. So, Mr. Peacock, do we have any additions or deletions to our agenda?
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda.
Okay, thank you. And I see that we have a special guest with us today. We have George Rossman, who is the Constituent Services Field Representative for Congressman Scott Tipton. And if you would like...
with our office as well, too.
Well, if you'd both like to come up and do a little public comment, that would be great. You just need to come to a mic and introduce yourselves.
We will. Do you want us to do it now?
Yeah, just go right ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay, come on. Come up to the table.
George knows everything.
The public wants
she
to
does
see
not.
you. They want to see the reps.
It's nice to see you, both.
Hi, I'm George Rossman. I know many of you, and I see Rachel quite often, actually, in a few of the other meetings. So I'm an area representative in a constituent services, so I do both for Congressman Tipton's office. So I've worked for him for about 3 years. In my previous life, I worked for Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell for almost 10 years. So
Know that well.
business for a while. I brought a couple of notes. I thought you guys might want a little update on what's happening in the House.
That'd be great.
So, excuse my back. I feel guilty. So I apologize. Between now and the end of the year, we expect the focus in the House to be on tax reform. So we don't know exactly what that looks like now. I've got some business cards with me. I will be more than happy to pass them out to anyone that would like to get us a comment. So everything that comes into our office, whether it's a letter, a phone call, however, we email, we make sure it gets to the congressman. So
Right.
I'll be more than happy to share anything that you guys would like me to pass along to her.
Perfect.
So another thing we expect is the CHIP program, which is the Child Health Insurance Program, to be refunded. So that looked like that was going to get funded through a while now, and then the Community Health Center funding should go through as well. I just had a brief conversation with John, and he was saying that there's some issues in that funding that the county didn't agree with. So get us a letter to our office, and we will make sure that that gets to the congressman.
Perfect. We'll work on that.
And we have a draft letter for you guys to look at later on today.
Okay, and I'll make sure that
You're
that
so efficient. My goodness.
So another thing that they're looking at is the Taylor Act, which is, it's just a little bit of removal of the Dodd-Frank bills. It's Congressman Tipton's bill, and what it does is eases some of the higher end restrictions instead of a one-size-fits-all for the small community banks and the smaller credit unions. So what's happened is so many small banks and credit unions are really struggling over the high cost of some of those regulations that came down that they can't keep up with them. So that looks like a really good chance that that's going to go through. Another thing is the Recreation Not Red Tape Act, and that's one that the congressman is a sponsor of. And what that does is a couple of the ski resorts, for the fees that they pay to the federal government, that legislation would bring some of those fees back to, like, say, the ski resorts that could be used to enhance and upgrade the resort. So there's that. We've got the Water Rights Protection Act. That looks like that's going to go through in a bigger package. What that one does is actually helps. It was introduced in, we're in the 115th Congress right now. It was introduced in the 113th in the House and the 14th, and passed the House on both. But what it does is Powderhorn Ski Resort was the one that, in order for them to get their lease on their federal land, they have leased for quite a while, the Forest Service was asking that they give up some of their water rights to the Forest Service. So this bill would make sure that state water rights take precedence over any federal water rights. So state water rights would be first and foremost. So that's another thing our office on. Anything I'm forgetting?
No, I do think that.
Well, you need to be on a
You have to be a
mic, so see,
microphone,
I
that's
knew
why.
I'd get you up here.
I do think that water rights. I think that Water Rights Protection Act. I do believe he talked with Chairman Bishop. I think they're going to run that. It's either that one or what's his other big bill. There's one they just got to where they're going to run it through as a standalone bill as opposed to in a package.
Into a package.
If you email us if you have questions about that, we can. Brian Meinhardt would be able to answer that more directly, and we can get you that information.
Yeah, I believe the Water Rights Protection Bill was a standalone. And then, yeah.
I think they got the chairman to agree to run that through as a standalone bill because it was getting stalled.
And the red tape bill, that one about the money's coming back to Scaries, is that a standalone or in a package?
That is probably under a package. Right now, that hasn't come before the House, so it'll be interesting to find out.
Because that'd be something that we would want to be speaking with the Aspen Company.
Yeah, but absolutely, if they would like to contact our office,
Yeah.
we can make sure that they get the full information on that bill.
Be great.
Yep.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Steve.
Well, thank you for updating us on things that don't make the national news.
Yeah.
It seems like there's 2 or 3 big issues that are the only thing covered by the national press, and they're not necessarily things that apply to Western Colorado. So getting an update on, things that really are kind of local, more local issues here is important to us. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
We just like seeing you come up and visit us.
Well, yes.
Rachel.
Anything else? Oh,
Well, yes, thank you again for being here and helping our constituents with the services through, any sort of snafu that's going on with their Social Security or other type of programs. It really is very helpful for the Congressman's office to be doing that. I guess there's a couple of things I would like to comment on for the Congressman to take back. Particularly one of the new ones is this potential doubling or more than doubling of fees at national parks.
I better grab a pen, keep talking.
Okay.
That is a good one, Rachel.
The public comment period for that is now open, and I have forwarded some information to Cara so we could formally comment as a Board of County Commissioners. I'm certainly hoping the public comments as well, but it just seems very incongruous that at the same time the budget is being proposed for national parks is being cut by hundreds of millions, and then they're saying, but we need to raise these fees for revenues for backlog of maintenance that blush in comparison to the cuts. And so it seems as if it is really potentially fencing lower income and moderate income folks out of national parks and the time period in which they will be able to visit. Is it for 1 day or 3 days? So that affects business, whether it's Rocky Mountain National Park or it's a bad precedent for all of us, for all of our national parks. Those are American public lands, and the national government should be taking care of them as well. I mean, some fee is natural. We have fees at the Maroon Bells, but to double them at the same time the budget is being cut 20, 50 times more than the fees would raise, and saying it's for deferred maintenance is just hollow. And I realize that's not the Congressman's bill, but,
No, but
he will be
fine.
participating
And
on
Rachel, excuse me, can you please send me an email on that with your thoughts?
it. We will be
make
commenting
it
and
in a
we'll be
letter.
sending those forward. So
Okay.
we'll do that. The second has to do with the the budget that Congress does develop. You may note we are in the library meeting room today because we're building a new county administrative building, and that's going to be a great step forward for the county and our services we provide the citizens. We have temporary offices down in Basalt right now, and we have purchased that building, and our overall plan is then to turn that into a community health center working with Mountain Family Health. This serves low-income residents, Medicaid residents, even Medicaid care residents who can't find a doctor in this area, qualify that way. That whole model is built on folks having Medicaid. And these dramatic cuts that are being proposed on Medicaid will force the state to become an arbiter of who gets health care, whether it's children or whether it's seniors. And I'm sure you're aware that the only program that pays for low-income seniors to have nursing home care in their last hospice, their last 6-8 months of life, is Medicaid. And we are facing a dramatic increase in an aging population in all of Colorado, but certainly Pitkin County as well, where we expect to see those numbers be around 35% of the population.
Significant increase across the country, actually.
Going forward. And so these sort of cuts hurt our economy as well as our people. When folks are choosing between buying their prescription drugs or seeing a doctor, or whether they go out to dinner once a month, that hurts a local economy. And communities need to have these fundings for senior services that seniors have grown to depend upon, and whether it's immunization shots and well baby checkups and prevention of communicable diseases. Medicaid plays an incredibly important role in our society and in our community. And so I would just urge the congressman not to vote for any budget that significantly cuts those things. And I don't have all the numbers with me right now to go backwards in time, but we know that cuts have already occurred in a major way because of the sequester on both SNAP, food assistance, as well as Medicaid funding that's transferred to the state. So as a branch of the state, as an arm of the state, we're really concerned about what cutbacks will happen, and a shock of an inability to absorb those sort of cutbacks and serve the public. So please have the congressman work to sustain the benefits that sustain rural Colorado residents. This is incredibly important funding as well for rural hospitals. And if they're not receiving some sort of compensation through the Medicaid insurance, it just pushes up private rates further. Because those hospitals will either close, they can't carry that sort of debt, or they will be treating people with no compensation and pushing those rates onto private insurers. So please look at the big picture on those sort of things, not just budget cuts. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I will
You guys-
include that as well.
You have our new ledge director's contact information. Is that correct, or do you need that?
You mean Brian?
No.
So Dustin left, and now I just wanted to make sure. Sorry.
Our
to interrupt.
legislative director.
It is Liz Payne. She used to be our communications director. We can get you that.
That would be
contact
great if you could
info.
send it
And
to
it's
John Peacock.
Payne.
Payne.
So, same as my business card, and I got it. It's her first name, period, last name, at
Just Liz?
mail.house.gov.
Just Liz,
Elizabeth?
L-I-Z.
L-I-Z.
I think somehow she got Liz. I think her real name is like Elizabeth or something. But
But she is a new,
Great,
legislative
thank you
director.
for that update.
Thank you very
Greg,
much.
did you?
Sure, I'd love to say a little bit. Thanks for coming. Appreciate you all
Welcome.
being here. I think I spoke to George on the phone once last spring, perhaps, so it's nice to see you.
About the bridge.
Nice to meet you about the bridge, exactly. My concerns are just the things we hear around here regarding public lands. And I'm concerned when I hear that they're talking about removing aspects of the Antiquities Act. I'm concerned about tying removal of wildlife refuges like the Anwar in Alaska to the tax. I'd love to really get an understanding on why some of the riders associated with tax reform have to do with freeing up public land to oil and gas drilling. I think I'd really love to see Scott Tipton come and visit us and talk to us about that at some point.
Okay.
So maybe
I will
request
pass that along.
an in-person visit to Aspen would be great.
I will pass that along.
Okay, thank you.
If I could make one
Yeah,
last
go ahead.
comment. We're a community, and I think a lot of communities in Colorado are very concerned with climate change, what it's going to do with wildfire, what it does with our water supply resources, what it does with our recreational economy. I've lived here 40 years, and when I'd be back east visiting, folks would say, "Oh, what's it like there? Snow all the time?" And I'd say, "Well, we always have snow that sticks on the top of the mountains by the end of September, and we have snow that sticks in town by Halloween."
Yeah.
And that's
was
not
last
happening.
night.
I mean, we had a nice rainstorm the night before Halloween, and it's not happening. And we're having more and more frost-free days. no frozen snow days, and that changes everything. So I would really encourage the congressman to take a hard look at the climate change science that seems to be becoming outlawed at the national level, and consider the long-term impacts of those decisions we make about carbon emissions and energy sources. Thank you.
Steve?
You're welcome.
I know Steve's been making a list over here.
I'm making a
I've
list.
been taking notes
Spying on
on
him.
what George was saying, but
Page and a half so far for me. Okay.
to tag on to what Rachel is saying, a lot of communities in western Colorado are actively engaged in taking local action to counteract climate change issues. And Aspen, Pickens County being just two of them, but I don't know if you were aware, but Holy Cross Energy had an RFP for one 5-megawatt solar farm that they had put out last spring, and the Holy Cross Energy board selected 2 projects, and that was probably in response to the plan to mothball 2 of the units of the Cherokee coal plant in Pueblo in the next several years. But the 2 projects that the board picked to go ahead were one in Pickens County on Aspen Sanitation District land several miles outside of town, and the other one is on a site near the Eagle Airport in Eagle County, just a little bit south of Gypsum. So there will be these 2 projects, being in the news. Both of them will have to go through land use kind of applications and whatnot, but that's just an example of something that's happening locally.
Right, I did hear about
We're
Holy
trying
Cross.
to become more energy efficient, like in our new building over here. Also in the library here with the addition, it's actually using way less energy in this new building than it was in the old building, just by doing energy efficiency and different kind of lighting and whatnot. Same thing will apply in our new building. It will be highly energy efficient, and we're trying to set a good example for what other government entities and what the private sector could also do.
Well, I'm going to tag onto that too real quick, because the county, I think we have one more reading on the climate action plan. And we really started it with actions taken by county departments. So we're putting our best foot forward first to show people in the communities and other governmental entities what can be done starting in-house. So we're just getting the ball rolling on that. We're excited. City of Aspen's coming up with their plan, Basalt, Snowmass. We just joined what's the climate change communities? What's the mayor's new program? What is that called?
Colorado Compact.
Colorado Compact.
Climate.
And it's communities throughout the country that are joining together to look at climate action plans and actions that can be taken locally.
What's the name of that plan again?
It's
Compact for Colorado Communities is the actual name of it.
that what it is, but
It's an initiative that was started by the city of Aspen, and there are about 18 or 19 communities all the way, including Ray, Colorado, way over on the Nebraska
I've heard
border.
that, right?
Is one of the members who have joined in. So a lot of them are municipalities. Fewer of them are counties.
But Steve, the Mayor Skadron, has also kind of taken the show on the road, and he talks about this on a national level. So it's a way that we can start locally and see what we can do, because it takes the higher levels of government a little longer to catch up to local action. So that's kind of something exciting we're doing. Steve, did you have anything else?
Nope.
Well, again, thank you. Did you have any other questions back for us?
No, I pretty much try and keep up with what's happening up here, and I did know about Holy Cross, and thank you. That's wonderful news. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So we've been busy up here, and this next year is going to be even busier for us, I think.
And please let our office know if we can ever do anything for you guys.
Thank you. And there's a possibility of next Tuesday doing a walk across the new bridge in Glenwood. You
That's
might
soon?
4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, the public will be invited to walk across the new bridge in Glenwood.
So that's
Serious?
something you might
It's
want to
gonna
have
be
it.
done by
ahead of schedule.
quite a bit ahead. Okay.
Very exciting.
I heard 9 days, but that was supposed to be ahead of
Yeah.
schedule. Now this is
The weather,
even.
they're being.
Yeah.
They're moving quickly these days.
Well,
Okay,
congratulations.
Well, again, thank you for coming up to visit us.
Yeah, thank
you,
It's
guys.
nice to
And-
see you.
And please, your constituents were great. They came and met with
Great,
us this morning.
great. Good to hear.
Fantastic. Have a
Thank
safe
you.
drive home.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the board? No?
Board member comments? Or?
No, I'm going to go to public comment
Oh, okay.
first, but I just want to see if you had any follow-up. Okay.
No, thank
Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on items not on our agenda? Okay, seeing no public in the room, I'm going to bring it back to the board. Steve?
I heard the other day that a longtime Valley resident passed away. Linda Nelson was from the Arlean family. That was a real prominent ranching family in Aspen. She died at age 98 in Greeley.
Wow.
And her daughter, Donna Lou, was one of my classmates in high school, and she lives over in the Greeley area. But Linda was, her siblings, one of them was Brees Arlean, who owned the farm where Blue Lake is now located. And her sister Margaret owned the land where the tree farm, Ace Lane's tree farm land, that was her farm. And then her nephew Leo Arlean owned the ranch where Willits is located. So the family owned a whole big swatch of
Valley.
that ground down there. And then also her niece Lena Lemoy married into the Lemoy family, who used to own a whole lot of the land where the monastery is now, and they sold that land to them when the monastery came in 1956.
Wow.
So she's a longtime local person, graduated from Aspen High School many years ago. She taught elementary school in Basalt for many years. She was my sister's first grade teacher in Basalt when it was just the red brick building. So, you know, she did a lot of neat things in her life, came from a very important family here in the Valley. So just wanted to pass that on.
Yeah,
Great,
thanks.
thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Any other commissioner comments?
I could make one just on the passing also of Bob Bishop, who was the postcard photographer who took all
Oh,
the pictures
yes.
that we had in our postcards in western Colorado, really. He covered the western part of the state. But he first came at the Aspen Photo Conference that Franz Berko put together, where a who's who of preeminent American and European photographers came to Aspen in 1949, I think it was. It was after the Goethe bicentennial. Bob Bishop got his start there by photographing. There's a famous photograph in Berko's collection, I think, that Bob Bishop took of that conference. And since then, he documented the changes in western Colorado from the 1950s through the late 70s, or probably even mid-80s. And he just passed away last week. There's a bio of him in the Aspen Times this week. And there's a small documentary film that I helped make about him at Western State College that some people put together there and I contributed to. So
Wow.
we've got him on tape. Hopefully we'll have the video at the Historical Society. And when you look at the way things have changed, of course, because he came every year and photographed from Red Mountain or the Maroon Bells, so you can see pictures of the Maroon Bells, Maroon Road when it was dirt, for instance. And it's kind of a great journal or document, just looking at his cards of how things have changed here. So thank you for that.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, Patty. I have two things, and not to be too repetitive, I will ask that our public, our community, pay attention to this proposed increase of national park entrance fees. Having been in government for a while, I know that you kind of tier things down. So once you see the fees to a national park go up to those levels, you might very well see the fees following that for monuments or other recreation areas like the Maroon Bells. And the proposed fees at $70 a car, that's more than a day's wages for someone, you know, who's making even above minimum wage after taxes. And these are public lands. We need to protect them. We need to invest in them, and we need to make sure that all of America can visit them and enjoy them. slowly creeping closer to a retirement age myself, and my boyfriend and I look at the map of national parks that we'd like to visit and travel to in those golden years, and I think it's really important that we maintain that asset. So I'd ask the public to Google, comment national park entrance fees. That'll get you to the direct link to make your public comments on that. I think it's very important to create that record. Secondly, I had an interesting episode last night. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a knock on my door at Hunter Creek, and it was a neighbor and 2 members of the Aspen Volunteer Fire Department. And my neighbor said that his carbon monoxide alarm had gone off, and he was a far side of the building from me, on a totally different floor, but his readings were very high, and they came to check on my unit because I'm so close to the boiler room, and they're not sure what or why. So the readings were low in my place, or not at all, maybe because the windows leak, but it was a great reminder, as we're all supposed to be reminded, to make sure your carbon monoxide detector is working, that your fire alarm is working. They kind of always do this around October and Halloween as a reminder to everyone, and daylight savings time is the time to double check that. But I especially wanted to send a thanks to the Aspen Volunteer Fire Department to see those guys out there at 2 o'clock in the morning, helping a neighbor, helping prevent what could be a tragic circumstance. So,
now, are you sure there were firemen and not just men dressed in costume?
I was a little nervous about that at first, but they had the right equipment with them. And so anyhow, great thanks to Aspen Volunteer Fire Department for the care they give our community.
They do a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. So yesterday I made a comment, and I erred, so I'm going to correct that. The Emma Schoolhouse Christmas Bazaar, it's their 41st year, and it is next weekend. It's Friday, November 10th from 4 to 7 p.m. and Saturday, November 11th from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And this is where you can get amazing, unique, locally made gifts. So it's a great thing to support. It's always fun because you meet and greet a lot of people you only see at Christmas time at the Emma Schoolhouse. So the Emma Schoolhouse, right on Highway 82. So hopefully people will go down there and support locally made crafts. So I wanted to correct that. So seeing no other comment, we're going to move on to our agenda. And our first item is a consent agenda, the minutes of the regular meeting of October 25th.
So move to approve.
Great. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other comment? Steve?
Patty, before the meeting, you were wondering if there was not any commissioner comment, and it's not mentioned here, because it seems like somebody always has something to say, and I don't remember what comments were made, but I think it might be worth looking back at the tape to see.
If we made comments, they must not have impressed very many people.
I think they were. I think they came at the end, but I'll check.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I have a motion and I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion passes. Next item on our agenda is an individual consideration first reading set for public hearing on November 15th. It's a resolution establishing the formula for distribution of the municipal share of county sales tax revenue for the year 2018 as required by Resolution 78-121. Ladies, please introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon. My name's Ann Driggers, Finance Director.
Susan Atwood, Finance Department.
Susan prepares the sales tax collection information and distributes it to all the municipalities and oversees that program. So she's here to present the annual resolution for the distribution of the sales tax to the municipalities.
Great. Okay, the background is in '69 we imposed a 2%. Pitkin County imposed a 2% sales tax, which at the time was divided between the city of Aspen at 53% and then the county at 47%. And when in '78, when Snowmass Incorporated, another resolution was passed that split it between 43% to the county, 57% between the town of Snowmass, the town of Basalt, and the city of Aspen, based proportionally on the 1% of their sales tax collected. I have to say that you might be confused because it's the second time this year you've seen this resolution, but I was very late this spring with the 2017 resolution. So Are there any questions?
Rachel?
Just historic record or whatever, are the percentages changing much between Snowmass, Aspen, and Basalt?
Not really, no. And it's always, Aspen gets a little more than the county and the other two get less. So that's generally how. If you look at the second page, there's a chart that talks about, that shows the percentages for the last 5 years.
So the big shift probably would have been when Willits came on board for Basalt. Except that's in
Willits
Eagle
is in
County.
Eagle.
That's in Eagle County.
Yeah, that's in Eagle County, but
So,
that,
if you look at it, this year we're projecting that Basalt will actually go down. They've been historically above, 2.2, 2.3%. They're going to drop to 1.9%. Snowmass will go up slightly, and Aspen will go up slightly. And so basically what that means is that, Snowmass is going up the most. That means as a percentage of that total sales tax collected in Pickens County, with that Snowmass's proportion of that has gone up more than Aspen's, and Basalt has actually gone down.
and then Snowmass when they bring on Base Village, we'll probably see a shift then again.
My
Hopefully.
guess would be that with the increased commercial activity that we'll see in Snowmass, that will continue to shift. Yeah.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion? Steve?
First of all, on the resolution, there's one small printing error that we want to make sure is correct. On the town of Basalt.
Ann pointed that out to me, yes.
There's a period in there that doesn't belong. The numbers are all correct, but
Oh.
just I wanted to make sure that that
Yeah.
was correct in the final version.
Thank you.
Also, anytime I see my father's signature on something, I do a little double take.
Oh, yeah.
Pull on my heartstrings a little
That's
bit.
pretty cool, Steve. So would you like to make the motion?
I would like to make a motion to approve the resolution establishing the formula for distribution of the municipal share of the county sales tax revenue.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any other comments? Seeing that. Oh,
This is it'll be set for public hearing on November 15th. Yeah.
So I have a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Thank you very much,
Thank you
ladies.
for your
We'll
work
see
on
you on the
this. Appreciate it.
15th.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have an individual consideration items, public hearings. This is our second readings. The first item is the ordinance authorizing the Community Development Department Director to accept development covenants in connection with land use code development approvals. Hi.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Please introduce yourselves for the public.
Richard Neely, Assistant County Attorney.
And Suzanne Wolf, Assistant Director, Community Development.
Thank you.
We didn't
Okay,
plan
well-
that part out.
That's all right. I did want to point out we have a couple changes to this ordinance since first reading. Specifically, we have, I believe there were 5 development covenants listed that the Community Development Director could accept, and now we have an additional 5 on here after speaking with Suzanne and some of the other folks at Community Development. We tracked down some other ones that are authorized by the land use code, so I just wanted to point that out.
So those are 6 through 10.
Those are 6 through 10.
And those are all ones we currently use. None of that's new. It's definitely, it was just getting a more complete list.
So we're just adding it to, okay. Any questions?
No question, as much as a comment that I feel that this has a good move. I think it perhaps reduces unnecessary staff time, and the safeguard that all covenants must be approved to language and form by the attorney's office before the Community Development Director can sign off on those. So I think that's an important safeguard.
And if there's any questions or concerns, it can always get kicked back up to us, correct?
That's correct, Patty. And I wanted to also point out that in response to Rachel's inquiry last meeting about the ability for the Community Development Director to accept these development covenants in relation to the requirement under the Home Rule Charter that the board accept property acquisitions by ordinance, we've included in here just a belt and suspenders type of deal where we've got annually the community development director will bring an ordinance to you guys, basically a confirmatory ordinance of the covenants that were accepted during the prior year. And I think that also addresses the commissioner's request that they be updated on what covenants were accepted during the prior year. So I think that kind of covers both of those areas.
That's great.
Thank you for that. Very good.
Steve?
I think it's important that the public understands what is happening here, and I thought I would just read one little part of our packet material. It says, talks about the adoption of an ordinance results in a substantial amount of community development staff time being devoted to preparing ordinances and agenda item summaries for covenants that are non-discretionary and for land use items for which our board doesn't have the background information. So these things were being brought to us where it was non-discretionary. We had to approve it. It was just it was an ordinary thing that doesn't have to come to us. And you, Suzanne, and her co-workers had to spend a lot of time explaining things to us. It really was just a waste of time. And so I feel good that we would be passing this now and that we get an annual report just updating us on what different things were approved by community development.
Great. And a slight point of clarification on that. I guess I didn't want to suggest that this board could not make the choice to accept a covenant or something like that. Of course, you could have decided that.
Likewise, the community development director could turn down accepting a covenant also.
Right, that is correct. I guess the non-discretionary aspect was for the development applicant, really. So, but I agree, it does substantially cut back on the amount of time that community development spends to bring those covenants to this board. So.
Right. This is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Seeing none, I will keep the public hearing open until we see our next item. So I'll bring it back to the board.
I'll move to approve the ordinance authorizing the community development director to execute covenant agreements required in association with land use code development approvals.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any other comments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, it passes. That was a tough one again. Next, we have a resolution.
Patty, one quick thing, Joe. Just thanks, and thanks to Rye, because this has been kind of weighing on my department. So we were really appreciative to come up with a solution to this that helps to streamline that.
We thank you both.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next, we have a resolution, another big title here, Valerie. I'm going to read the whole thing this time. Resolution authorizing the Pitkin County Office of Emergency Management to accept the 2017 Emergency Management Performance Grant from the State of Colorado Department of Public Safety, Division of Homeland Security, and Emergency Management for the purpose of funding a portion of Pitkin County Emergency Management annual budget.
Very good. Good afternoon. I'm Valerie McDonald. I'm the Pitkin County Emergency Manager. This is the fourth consecutive year I've been here seeking board approval of the Emergency Management Performance Grant. It's the primary source of federal funding passed to states and local counties to ensure the development of all-hazard emergency response plans. The anticipated amount of the award is $65,000. The award would be used to offset a portion of the emergency management budget. You're familiar with this grant, so I'll stop there and take comments and any questions you may have.
Greg?
I'm just talking to John yesterday. I think it came up that I think you've had questions about whether we want to continue to do this, only because I'd just love to hear your comments on, there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and I guess the question arises at some point, is the grant worth pursuing? It seems like a lot of money, but what can you tell us? What do you think?
Well, I was the first emergency manager 4 years that agreed and went for this grant and got it, and I felt good about that. I felt it was the best thing to do for the citizens of Pitkin County. In the 4 years I've been in the grant deliverables have doubled. It's not subjective. They have doubled. Monitoring has increased, and we're constantly threatened that the money will decrease. In a nutshell, the way I see it, the grant's not scalable. I, as the emergency manager of Pickens County, Office of One, I have the same grant deliverables as Denver or Boulder County, and they have large emergency management staffs. In the past, I've successfully balanced the needs of the county with the states, and I'm finding that increasingly difficult. The grant is very subjective. So I'll just close in saying I do the best I can. So far I've been successful in getting the money, but it's becoming a conflict for me. There's a lot of days I feel like there's something I need to be doing for the county versus what the state wants me to do, which I don't always think is meaningful.
I might just build on that because I was actually just told Valerie I was probably going to bring that up as an item. It is our recommendation, obviously, that the board accept this grant, but we wanted to foreshadow for the board that we are increasingly becoming concerned about the additional requirements that are being placed, particularly on smaller local jurisdictions like ours. We think this is probably a struggle for a number of smaller rural jurisdictions in Colorado. It's been my observation that there is not good recognition right now among state emergency management staff of local government challenges. And I think what's happened is, that Colorado's faced some really significant disaster, whether it be the Boulder floods, the fires, and as a result, there's been a pretty significant expansion of staffing and resources at the state level. And with all good intent, those resources have been developing additional processes and requirements and those sorts of things that are rolling down to the local level where there has not been the same level of expansion of emergency management resources, but the requirements, to Valerie's point, are increasing as a result. And so there will be a tipping point if this trend continues, where we'll want to talk to you about whether we should continue to accept these grant dollars and the strings that come attached to them, or whether we should really focus on what we think is most important for our emergency management planning and response. And so we're not there yet, but we just wanted to kind of foreshadow for you guys, we're concerned that conversation is coming our way.
Rachel.
Well, I appreciate the heads up, and this is a concern I was unaware of, so thank you for taking it off your back and letting us know it's right on our front plate. It does strike me that perhaps this is an issue that could be brought up to the Colorado Sheriff's Association and see if they might be able to leverage a little bit of a second tier or for smaller counties or rural counties at below a certain amount. And it may be something that CCI can work on. It's potentially administrative as opposed to legislative. I don't know that these new requirements have come through legislature. And so the Colorado's County Sheriff's Association is a pretty strong political mover down at the State House. And, perhaps part of it is just really writing it up and getting, a couple dozen smaller counties to say, hey, this is an issue for us too, and see if we can take it forward to the state and get some changes before we just have to, fish or cut bait.
It's a good idea. And we can help with that too, contacting others or getting some power in that numbers.
I think there's a lot of concern among some of the smaller counties about losing funding, and so there has not been counties maybe as bold as ours in raising those concerns with the department.
But again, maybe if we put them diplomatically and just point out that this has become a bit of an issue, and make a suggestion for a few areas where it could be modified or changed for, again, a level 2 county or something like that. When you look at it, the state is already segregating counties by the salary, categorization, and so maybe we could just, play off of that.
So then we'd have to, that'll be a discussion we should have before we work on this.
It's a separate discussion. And
Sure.
it's definitely our recommendation that
Move forward on this one
we
and
move
talk about it
forward on
next
this grant. We just wanted to take the opportunity because Valerie certainly raised these concerns internally, and we had not raised them with you yet.
Any other questions for Valerie on this? I'm going to this is kind of a sidetrack, but don't forget to let us know when that exercise is going to be so we can attend if we are able to.
I will. It'll be
Get us
December
out there.
12th. And we're full blast, full steam ahead with John Kenny, Airport Director, and his staff. So it will be a meaningful learning experience, which means it'll increase our ability to respond. And I think there'll be an entertainment value.
I was going to say, I could tell from the smile on your face. I'm like, she's taking this real serious here. This is also a public hearing. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
I would make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the Pickens County Office of Emergency Management to accept the 2017 Emergency Management Performance Grant from the State of Colorado Department of Public Safety, Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the purpose of funding a portion of the Pickens County Emergency Management annual budget.
We love those titles.
I'll second that and all the work it implies for you.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? No, and motion passes.
Thank
you,
you.
Valerie. We appreciate all your work.
That was December 12th?
Yes, I'll send an email to you.
Perfect. And before we move on, I forgot to say something at public comment, which is very important. We have an election. We have an election, and election day is Tuesday. And please, for those of you who have not returned your mail-in ballots, it's getting a little tight as far as mail with the bridge closure. Some of our mail delivery systems are kind of caught up in that. So please, there are drop-offs at the county clerk's office, which is in the Brand building downstairs on, what is it, Hyman and Galena?
Yeah, it's behind the old Ute City Bank.
No, it's the old Union City Bank that had the great
Cohen
bar
Hogan.
with the big safe behind it.
Cohen-Hogan Building.
It's in there
Cohen-Hogan
at the Jewish Center, which is on Main Street. There's also a drop-off box in front of City Hall in Snowmass Village, and there's one behind Basalt, and we're kind of sharing that with Eagle County. So there are those drop-off places. Steve, remember to get your ballot in. He told me he forgot it, and he's going to have to drop it off. I would not, at this point, trust the mail system, so please drop off your ballot. And that would be great, because we will be counting ballots the first of the week, and hopefully we'll have enough numbers to release some information shortly after 7 o'clock on Tuesday. Okay, is there any open discussion?
Yeah, so, do you mind if we hand that
No.
around? So I'm handing around a letter, and this was
You just
referenced when
deliver
George was making her comments. As soon as you guys approve it, we'll deliver it, because this one happens to be to our Representative Tipton, actually. And so this is a letter requesting a no vote on H.R. 3922, the Champion Act. And basically, the concern here, and I apologize, Kara has done more research on this, but she could not be here for this today. Our understanding is this is going up for a vote this week. As we're seeing with a lot of bills these days, they're not going through the committee process. They're being developed, and they're coming at us pretty quickly. But in essence, what the Champion Act does that we like is it does provide funding for community health centers, and that would be, our local community health centers, Mountain Family Health, which we've certainly invested heavily in, both on the capital and operating side to ensure their success. However, the funding for the community health centers in this case comes through a cut, a 75% reduction in public health preventive services grants. And so a lot of those are the pass-through grants that, for example, right now we pass through to community health services for vaccination programs, chronic disease prevention programs, a lot of those contracts that, as you sit as a Board of Health, you've recently seen and approved pass-throughs through our public health department. And so the concern here is that we're really taking funding from one pocket that's serving a vulnerable population and putting it into another pocket that's also serving a vulnerable population, but overall, it still represents a significant cut in resources for those who otherwise would not and do not have access to these preventive health services. From a population health management perspective, the preventive health services are a much, much less expensive way for a community to deal with chronic disease, and basically our ever-increasing healthcare costs than having those conditions rise to the point where they need to be treated typically in an emergency room or through increased utilization of our community health centers, which are really at capacity. So the concern here isn't so much the goal of the legislation, which is to fund the community health centers. We would recommend supporting that. It's more that it's actually coming from a pot of money that's also serving that same population in a different way.
Interesting. Any comments, Rachel?
Well, I support sending the letter. I don't know from reading it if it is as clear of what we would like to support. Vote no on the Champion Act and vote yes for improving our nation's health system. Perhaps vote no on the Champion Act unless it is amended to not take its funds, and to fund this other program. I don't know. I mean, I'll leave it if you think it makes sense as it is.
Okay.
But
and if we have time it's going for a vote really quick.
Okay, so then we need to just send it. But I'd just like
to
talk about for a moment, you read national issues of infectious disease and communicable disease breakout, the tragedy in California with the hepatitis A outbreak where they're literally bleaching the streets, and they've had over 19 people die, and it's now starting to spread into other areas where tourists have picked it up and brought it back to other areas. We've seen communities that lost their health services and then have large HIV/AIDS outbreaks. And preventative health, as you said, it's a lot easier to keep the toothpaste in the tube than to try to put it back in. So I really am glad our staff is ahead of this one.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Steve.
What the things that are proposed to be cut here, vaccinations, chronic disease prevention, and infectious disease prevention, are the basis of how the Veterans Administration healthcare system works. They put the money up front into these exact things in order to prevent a lot of much more expensive healthcare things down the road. And I totally support sending this letter. I think the government would do well to look at what the Veterans Administration is doing as a way to cut our healthcare costs down, and we don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish, I think is how the saying goes.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess my comment with that is, listening to what Rachel just said, just if we're going to say vote no in the Champion Act, let's say vote no and leave it at that. Voting and adding and vote yes for improving nations, that's not an act that's being voted on. Maybe we just cut it there and say vote no on this, because if you look at the second half of the sentence, it's saying
it's confusing.
It's subjective. And
Is that more important than me signing it and handing it to them right now since they're going to vote this week? We do
have another printer over in the jail. We can print up
They're not leaving yet.
More than happy to wait if you would like to.
I personally think it's written as I would like it to be written, so it's really up to the board.
I'll leave it go. Since you've been here for the dialogue and understand, I'll let it go at that. But the major thing is these cuts aren't helping citizens. And I know there's this large, let's get rid of the deficit, cut every federal program. But the discretionary funding being spent on American citizens right now on support programs is less than percentage-wise as during the Eisenhower era. And we're also seeing a tax proposal that would radically increase that deficit at this point in time. So it's of great concern that we continue to have the programs that support citizens of Colorado.
Well said.
Okay.
Okay.
So don't want to change it, want to sign it and hand it in, I'll go along with it. I just think, for future, let's just be.
So would you ask Congress to give us more time to get letters in? Tell them to slow down a little bit.
But, I honestly, we can stay if you would
No.
like to go back.
No,
And if
no,
it's
no,
not
no.
gonna take that long, I'll be happy to stay a while longer.
Yeah, we'll let it go. You know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Any other open discussion?
That's all I had for open discussion.
Board?
Nothing for me.
Wow. Okay, so remember to vote. So I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Got through.
Good job.
Signing.
No, of course
Well
not.
done.
I just whipped us.
Good.